With Ash Blossom worth its weight in gold, a lot of players want to play the game competitively without having to break the bank on money cards like this. Well, I've got 5 decks that are not only competitive, but that you can build both main and extra for $100 or less. What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 5 budget decks for the December 2017 format. This is a video for anyone who loves playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitively, but you can't afford cards like Ash Blossom, Evenly Matched, or any of the expensive hand traps that people deem necessary to play in this current format. Because with SPYRAL being the dominant deck, a lot of people deem that if you're going second, you really need these hand traps to compete. And while that may be partially true, that doesn't mean there aren't options available that you can still play this game on a competitive level. And we're going to cite some examples, but before we get into that, I did want to shout out my newest patrons, Kenny, James, and Israel. And if you want to consider supporting me as well as the channel so that I can continue bringing you Yu-Gi-Oh! Content on a daily basis, check out the Patreon link in the description below. But without further ado, let's get into the top 5. Starting, of course, with number 5, we have Gren, Maju, DoAiza. You guys knew I was going to put this in here in some form or another because, as we saw at YCS San Diego, Gren, Maju, DoAiza made an appearance. And while the deck did manage to go 4-3-1, for the fact that it's Gren, Maju, DoAiza, 4-3-1, at least in my view, is a rather respectable finish overall. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this strategy, Gren, Maju, DoAiza is essentially the win condition that gains attack value based off of the number of cards that are currently banished. So the idea is to banish a ton of cards with cards like Pot of Desires and Necroface, and then you're able to just attack in for one big swing with Gren, Maju, DoAiza and just kill your opponent out of nowhere. And this is actually a really interesting strategy in the current meta because battle traps are completely devoid from the current format, and if you're playing stuff like Twin Twisters and other things to get rid of other disruptive traps that your opponent might be playing, or maybe any other just disruptive forms of removal, then if you can get in with that one attack with Gren, Maju, DoAiza, it's more than likely going to go through, and your opponent's not going to have anything to stop it. And that's what's so crazy and why this strategy actually works. Now, the biggest drawback to this strategy and why I have this at number 5 is because of the consistency issues. The biggest issue is that Gren, Maju, DoAiza is your win condition, and the unfortunate thing is you don't have a super consistent way to get into it. Gren, Maju, DoAiza is an unsearchable win condition, and because of that, you're going to have issues where, you know, sure, you can possibly just stall out your opponent as long as you possibly can with all of your cards, like your hand traps to end the battle phase, or Electromagnetic Turtle, or any of the other cards that are defensive that the deck plays so that it can establish its win condition and go in for the kill. But the problem is that's not exactly the most reliable strategy. It's kind of like why strategies like Chain Burn and other stall strategies fall short, because you're kind of playing a race against the clock to see if you can stall your opponent out long enough to get to your win condition. And with some of the consistency that some of these other top meta decks have, especially with other forms of disruptive removal, and the way that these decks function, you don't really have that much time to establish a win condition like this if you're not able to draw it realistically in the first couple of turns. So that's the biggest drawback to this deck, and if you want to check out the profile more in depth, I do have it up on my channel. Yishan goes into extreme detail on how the deck works and some modifications that you might make if you're interested. And plus, not to mention, it is an extremely budget option. But moving on to number 4, we have a deck that I haven't talked about in a very long time, but I know has a very big fan following, and that deck is Heroes. Now, the reason I have Heroes on here is twofold. First off, it's above Gren, Maju, DoAiza because it's a lot more consistent than a deck like Gren, Maju, DoAiza. But the second reason, and probably the more important reason why I have Heroes on the list, is because of the matchup that it has versus SPYRAL. If you're able to establish a card like Dark Law going first against a SPYRAL player, they're going to be in for a world of trouble. And the reason for that is because Dark Law's passive ability of just being able to banish every every card that's sent to the graveyard really cripples Spyral's ability to combo off. That means that any of their copies of Foolish Burial Goods aren't going to be able to send combo pieces to the graveyard. Anytime that they're going to try to use Quick Fix, it's going to get banished, so that's not going to work. By banishing all these combo pieces that the deck needs to function, the deck just falls and cripples apart, and that's what's so powerful about a card like Dark Law. Now, you could say that there is some reliance on this deck going first, because if you're playing heroes going into an established board, then obviously that's not going to be a good thing for you, but the deck is incredibly affordable, it's incredibly consistent because the deck has a million different ways to access Dark Law, and the biggest thing you do have to worry about is Spiral Tough, because now that Spiral players are basically maining 3 copies of Spiral Tough, that is an inherent out that the deck has to Dark Law, but if you're playing a plethora of traps to support Dark Law and pretty much play a Protect the Castle style deck to ensure that your Dark Law is going to stay sustained on the field, then you're going to be in really good shape. If you can stop the Spiral Tough, that's really all you're going to have to do to ensure that Dark Law is going to ride you to victory. Now, again, like any deck on this list, there are the drawbacks that it's not as powerful as the other meta decks, and you're really relying on going first, because playing heroes going second, especially in this meta that we're currently faced, is a very, very big uphill battle. However, if you can get lucky and win some dice rolls, and you can establish Dark Law early, you might be able to ride this deck not only to the top of your locals, but hell, maybe even a regional top finish as well. Who knows? Anything's possible, but Dark Law has an extremely good matchup in this current format, and for a budget player, it's anyone's paradise. Now, moving on to number 3, we have Dinosaurs. Now, Dinosaurs is a very interesting choice here, because when the November 2017 ban list hit, and people were essentially trying to figure out the format and how everything was going to evolve, Dinosaurs were a deck that kind of fell by the wayside because, you know, Dinosaurs got hit rather hard with just these past few ban lists just as a whole, with the loss of Denglong and Miscellaneousaurus going to 1, and all these different things. Lithosogym getting banned as well was also a crippling hit, but Dinosaurs have managed to make a resurgence. At YCS Prague, there was actually a Dinosaur player that made top 32. There was a Shadal Dinosaur player, I think, that was playing like some 60 card variant that was playing Dinosaurs. And then there was also at YCS San Diego a player that bubbled playing Dinosaurs as well and almost made the top 32 there. So Dinosaurs are a somewhat viable strategy, but let's go ahead and discuss why. The reason is because they have this fucking beast, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. Now, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno is insane because its quick effect is non-targeting, which makes it a very viable option in order to combat something like Spiral Sleeper, which is currently one of the most oppressive cards of the format. The fact that Ultimate Conductor Tyranno also has 3,500 attack points is also something you can't really scoff at, because that is fucking huge. And if you're really playing this deck, you've also got cards like Double Evolution Pill to turbo out Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, while also having Soul Eating Overraptor as well as Fossil Dig to really get you to your win condition as fast as humanly possible. Now, you don't have cards like 3 Miscellaneousaurus anywhere to ensure that your plays are going to go through as effectively as they might have in the past, but we've seen that at both YCS San Diego and YCS Prague, the deck is capable of competing in this format. And essentially, the deck is just comprised of like 3 Dino Smasher structure decks. You also need to get your copies of Double Evolution Pill out of Battles of Legend, I believe, and then maybe another couple competitive staples, but ultimately, you don't really need a whole lot more than that. You can just focus your deck on really turboing out Ultimate Conductor Tyranno. Sure, if you have hand traps, you can throw those in there. That's obviously going to help you out, but we've seen that the deck doesn't even need that to really facilitate any of its extremely powerful plays, and that's why I had to give it the number 3 slot. Now, moving on to number 2, I had to give this one to ABC because ABC has also performed very valiantly in this current format. I got 3rd place at YCS San Diego, it made the top 32 at YCS Prague, and yeah, sure, again, this is another deck that if you have hand traps on hand, if you can throw them in the ABC deck, it's just going to help you in your Spiral matchup, which is going to be the matchup you're going to see the most at any competitive event, but that doesn't mean that the deck is solely reliant on that. You've got a boss monster like ABC Dragon Buster, which, for what it is, ABC Dragon Buster is one of the strongest and most affordable budget boss monsters in this game's existence because once again, it came out of a structure deck. The deck core is incredibly cheap, and there's a lot of really cool things you can do with it. ABC is perfectly capable of running a ton of floodgates, which are very powerful in this format. Anti-Spell Fragrance as well as Mistake, and any other powerful floodgates you can run are incredibly affordable at the moment and completely disrupt strategies like Pendulum Magician, Trickstar, as well as SPYRAL. So you can make a very trap-heavy ABC build, which is very indicative of something like we saw in the past at YCS Anaheim back in 2016. There's also the ability to run a card like Skill Drain, which I've discussed in the past. That's basically your auto win button versus SPYRAL, and the fact that your deck can play under Skill Drain very effectively is a very, very powerful boon indeed. The fact that you have all these control aspects to the deck, but also the ability to just flat out OTK your opponent because of the way the deck functions, and anytime you're detaching your ABC Dragon Buster for its original pieces, you're just able to turbo off and go in on your opponent. So I feel like ABC has a lot of good pieces that really help justify its standing as the number 2 slot on this list. But moving on to number 1, this is the one you guys have all been waiting for. Without further ado, it has to be Pendulum Magician. Now, Pendulum Magician has been in decline, to be perfectly fair, in terms of the competitive meta, with Trickstar on the rise and SPYRAL establishing itself as the number 1 deck. However, this deck is still incredibly affordable for anyone who's looking to play on a budget, but also probably at the highest tier of competitiveness that they possibly can. The deck is incredibly cheap because most of the pieces are from a single set, and if you look, everything is around maybe $1, maybe $1.50 at max, and one of the most beneficial aspects is this is probably a deck that's not likely to get hit on the upcoming January ban list. I can't say that that's going to be 100% true, but with how it's looking with SPYRAL and Trickstar being the top decks, more than likely those are the decks that are going to get hit. If you invest in Pendulum Magician, not only because of the fact that it's kind of moving down in status, but also because of the fact that the Link Vrains pack has cards like Heavy Metal Foes Electrum, which are going to incredibly boost the deck's consistency to levels just far beyond what we know now. That's another good reason you might want to invest in this deck now while it's still cheap. The fact you can get all the cards for a very low price, there are a couple expensive ones, like yeah, you might have to pick up a couple copies of Cyframe Lord Omega, maybe pick up a Beals, although all Pendulum Magician decks don't necessarily play a copy of Beals, but there are a few expensive cards. But one of the biggest advantages of Pendulum Magician is the fact that you don't need to run hand traps. Pendulum Magician is a deck that runs the fewest hand traps out of any current competitive deck, and yes, while you could attribute that to the fact why the deck is currently in decline, at the same time, because the deck is so combo centric and the more combo pieces you have, the better, that's all the more reason that this deck is beneficial for anyone who wants to play on a budget, because you don't need those hand traps. You can just combo off, establish your extremely powerful boards, and literally just OTK your opponent the next turn, and whether or not you have a hand trap, that's perfectly fine, because Pendulum Magician actually plays rather well when it goes second. It's not perfect, but the fact that you can play a deck like Pendulum Magician on a budget, and then maybe get some more pieces over time and upgrade it to a more tier 1/tier 1.5-ish deck is definitely the reason why Pendulum Magician has established itself in the number 1 slot. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about your favorite budget options moving forward for the December 2017 format. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.